as Ben said, my name is Alice. I've been coming to St. Peter's for about a year. It's really nice to have you with us. But when I was growing up, I was a boundary pusher. I was one of those kids who would look straight in the teacher's face while they told me not to do the thing that I was doing, with a little smirk. You can imagine that I was their favorite student. And I was one of those kids that I'm imagining you've seen before with like crazy hair and mud all over my face, and tree climbing was my like vibe. I tree climbed all the time. But that sense of adventure followed me all the way to university, where I studied philosophy in London. And I remember before starting my degree, sitting in my room, being like, I'm making a decision right now. 10% fun. 10% work, 90% fun. That's what's my next 3 years. All of the fun. And so my party-going, boundary-pushing, freedom-loving self was so excited for the chaos. And I can confirm that there was a lot of chaos. And I partaked in much of the chaos. But then, midway through my first year of university, I was invited to church. And I thought, what the heck, why not? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I get to watch people be Christians. It'll be fascinating. So I went along, and it was a church much like this. People were lifting their hands in worship. The songs seemed to go on for a lot longer than I remember going to like a very traditional church growing up. And they prayed for things out loud. They talked about this relationship with Jesus. And I thought every single bit of it was so weird. But something about the people I met and began to get to know was kind of surprising. They weren't this cardigan-wearing, judgy, small-minded, unintelligent type Christian that I was expecting to meet. They were fun. They actually were funny. They had things to say. They were intelligent. They didn't really care about my many questions that at times I can definitely confirm were pretty rude. And the real kicker was that they actually believed in Jesus. They actually believed in this guy. I just didn't get it. And so for about 6 months, I irregularly showed up to church, and I sat definitely at the back and preferably behind a pillar, because that meant that I could really have a look. What are these people doing? You know, why are they here? I get to see everyone's faces without them necessarily getting to know me. And throughout that 6 months, I still didn't believe anything. And then one Sunday, this vicar called Ed spoke, much like I'm doing now. And after the service, he invited people to come to the front and be prayed for. And I thought immediately, won't be doing that. I'll be staying in my seat, thank you very much, behind the pillar. And then after he kind of invited people to come up and people were being prayed for, I watch as he walks off the stage, walks around the pillars, and right to me at the back. And he went, my name's Ed, I'd like to pray for you. I feel like the Lord is speaking to me about you. And I thought, I'm too British to say no to a direct question. So I said yes. And then he just said to me, why don't you open your hands like this, like you're receiving a gift from God, like it's a bit more open than doing this. And why don't you, in your own heart and mind, just ask that if you're real, God, come and make yourself known to me. And so he then just put his hand on my shoulder and invited the Holy Spirit. And in that moment, this feeling of weight fell all over my body, like tangible physical feeling of heaviness. So much heaviness that I fell to my knees. And the thing that's most difficult to describe about this is that it didn't feel bad. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, this heaviness is all over my body and I feel a bit like suffocated, or it felt life-giving. It felt like a heated blanket almost. And somehow deep down inside of me, I just knew this is how much God loves me. This is God's love. And I don't know how long Ed was praying for me, maybe 5 minutes. But during that, deep down in the heart of things, similarly to what Nikki shared, I didn't feel at sea anymore. Like something had been anchored in me. And this is the moment that I became a Christian. And this week, as I was thinking about this coming home feeling, and my kind of tangible first experience of God, I was reminded of a really famous story in the Bible, which is often called the Prodigal Son. But it's really a tale of two sons, both of whom aren't really at home with their father. So this morning, I'm going to rename it for us. It's the story of the homeless boys. This is Luke 15:11-32. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." Okay, so just really quickly before I continue, one thing that's actually quite interesting to peg into your brain before I keep reading. The Greek meaning of "Father, give me my share of the estate" is actually more accurately translated, "Father, give me my share of your being, your very being." So the language the son uses here is not just saying, like, give me financially what's mine, even though he is asking that. He's also basically declaring, kind of in the undercurrent, I don't even really care that you exist. I don't care. I just want what's mine. So in light of that, back to the story. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I'll set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, was filled with compassion for him, ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf, kill it. Let's have a feast, let's celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost, and now he's found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son, the second homeless boy, was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother came home,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because, he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never even gave me a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" So when I was reading that, something that I was thinking a lot about was this this kind of sentence that the theologian Augustine of Hippo once wrote. He said this, "You have made us for yourself, Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you." And the Christian claim is that each of us will only truly rest, only truly feel at home in our own skin, only truly feel ourselves or even more of ourselves when the Father in heaven who knows us and who loves us actually draws close to us when we know him. And I believe that was the love that fell on my body that day. And it's also the love that Jesus so often speaks about in the Gospels. Here are a few examples of what Jesus says about his relationship with his Father. He says, "I only do what I see my Father doing, and I and the Father are one." He also says, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. And whatever the Father does, the Son also does, for the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does." So Jesus enjoys this relationship of love and trust and unfathomable intimacy to the point where he describes it as we are one. We are one and the same. And at his baptism, his father proclaims, "This is my beloved son, with whom I'm well pleased." And just an aside, Nikki, I think that's what the Lord is saying to you this morning. This is my beloved daughter. Everyone, look, this is my beloved daughter, with whom I'm well pleased. But the thing is, back to the story, that's not the kind of relationship these sons are experiencing, is it? There's a distance, there's a numbness, there's a rejection from son to father in both cases. And I'm sure many of us, just like me, immediately feel akin to the brother who runs away and has a party and squanders everything and is fully at the feet of hedonism and it's all, I immediately am like, yes, I see where you're going with that. I feel those feelings. But I do think it's a mistake for us to just read this story as one for those of us who either previously or currently love a party and often squander our money. I'm not very good with money, my husband will attest. At its heart, this story reveals that each of us have our own mechanisms to run and to hide. And some of these mechanisms actually aren't even our fault. Maybe they're things that we've developed to protect ourselves emotionally, physically. And some of them, though, are a choice. They're a desire to be in control, to be independent, and sometimes even to break things. Perhaps your mechanism is staying busy. It's like the buzz of life doesn't actually allow you to think in your brain or your heart, what is actually going on deep down in there? Or perhaps you've had bad experiences of friendships or close relationships, and that experience again and again and again has just caused you to build I'm going to be in control. I'm going to have a tough exterior that's hard to break. And so you actually find it hard to trust people, to be vulnerable with them, to have a connection with them. Perhaps your childhood was really traumatic. And the kind of fear, the uncovering what that actually feels on the inside, the pain that you actually feel is but then it would never leave me. It would always be here. There would never be enough processing of that pain. So it's just better to keep the box closed. Or perhaps you lost a loved one during the pandemic, and just ever since then you've been numb. I mean, I could list things and list things and list things. So in this story, the youngest son hits rock bottom. And I think that some of us, like this boy, only really face the reality of our lives, how we feel, what we're going through because of some disaster or crisis. We choose to use our coping strategies, actually much like Nikki talked to us about. We choose to use these coping strategies for as long as we possibly can. I mean, we've all done it. I've done it. And I don't know about you, but I always find a perfectly good reason for everything that I do. Even if it's destructive to me. I'm there's a reason, guys. Don't worry about it. And particularly when I feel pain, I seem to go right back to whatever feels familiar. But what happens when we do that over and over and over again? I think our hearts become pretty hardened. We can feel lonely, numb. We build up anger, resentment, and where do we go with that? And that's why I find it so moving that as soon as the first homeless boy even appears over the horizon, stinking probably from the pig crap, filthy, the father rushes out to meet him. I find it moving because to be out the door so quickly, that means the dad has been looking. He has been at the kitchen window being maybe today will be the day. Please, come home to me. So he's been stood at the window and immediately he's get out, let's go. My son's home. And I find this moving because also in the ancient East, older men, fathers didn't run. In fact, fathers were expected to wait. I wait for my child to approach me. They address me first out of respect, and then I address them. And yet this long-forgotten father is different. He races to the place of reunion with his son. There isn't even time for his son to stutter, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you." Apologies cannot be heard over the roar of relief and excitement. "This son of mine is lost and he's found. Let's just have a party. I don't even want to hear it. I love you." And so the first child comes home. And I believe that this story is true of all of us. Our Father in heaven longs for each of us to return to him. No matter what prompted us to leave, what we've done whilst we've been away, no matter what emotions we're feeling, he can handle it. He sprints to be with us, he holds us, and he looks in each of our faces and he says, "My son, my beloved daughter, my beloved son, with whom I'm well pleased." So what about the second homeless boy? Because he actually lives in the same house of his dad, but he doesn't really seem to be at home with him. He doesn't feel close to him. And his angry protest when his brother returns makes that pretty clear. He's pretty angry. "I have slaved for you. I have worked for you. You won't even give me a goat." I mean, I don't fully, experience that. We don't get given goats in the same way. But he's angry that he can't even have a smaller animal. "You don't even let me celebrate with my friends." He just doesn't know where the justice is. Where's the justice? He can do what he wants. I've done everything. And for us to understand what's really happening here, let me just walk you through a tiny bit of context. Because we know from Luke that Jesus is sharing this parable in the presence of tax collectors, prostitutes, Gentiles, i.e. the people that will immediately see eye to eye with the runaway son. They're immediately like, "Yep, we haven't always been accepted in the family of God. I can see where you're going here, Jesus." But we also know that at the time, the Pharisees or the Jewish religious elite were keeping a very close eye on Jesus and his ministry. And they were often whispering divisively under their breath, "This self-proclaimed Messiah is spending time with sinners." Sinners. And I want to point out the Pharisees because they really don't like what Jesus is doing. If you were a Pharisee, your whole identity was "Look at how well I follow the law. I'm pretty good at this. I'm perfect." And the better and better you became at following the law, the closer you could reach to God. And here is Jesus in the presence of all of these people saying, intimacy with God is a free gift. Where's the justice? So in this moment between father and second son, I actually think that Jesus is aware of the Pharisees and he's looking at them and he's attempting the best he can to draw them in. He's being kind. He's saying, "Guys, you're already in my house. You can have everything. You already have it." Jesus is turning to the religious elite, earnestly looking in the eyes and saying, "You have the same invitation, by the way. You just have to drop the religion, drop the pride, drop the power, and you can come to me." And if I'm honest, this is kind of the religious ladder system I was kind of expecting when I first walked into church. I think it's kind of what most of our society is expecting. We've become accustomed to associating church with judgment, rule following, small-mindedness. It just seems a bit out of touch, doesn't it, all of this church stuff? And I think it is what often people have experienced inside of church. I read recently of a South Korean woman's experience in prayer, and it just really got to me. I was suddenly something has come alive when I read it. So let me tell you about it. She recounted that growing up, her culture had led her to believe that she must always meet authority with reverence, get on her knees, reverence. And so for that reason, her experience of church and kind of her understanding of church then mixed in with that culture had led her to believe that she has got to meet God with fear. She needs to get on her knees and beg that God would hear her, beg that he would know her, beg that he would answer her prayer, beg that he would draw close. And then while she was doing this one day, she had an image come into her mind, just in her imagination, of her doing this, of her getting on her knees and begging the Lord And she had this image come into her mind that God just tapped her on the shoulder, and she turned round, and he looked her in the eye and said, just look into my face when you pray. And I think God was revealing to her, you don't have to beg. The intimacy is free. The God of our own creation is often distant, unemotional. He's austere, he's frightening. He's like a cosmic traffic cop watching out for what we've been doing, you know? But often the people who most readily rebuke our own behavior, like, you didn't do that right, you know, you're not clean enough or good enough, or you don't follow the rules well enough. Actually, they're so often the ones who are so desperately in need of casting off their own baggage. But somehow, through gritted teeth, they're just like, there is a moral duty to be performed. I must tell them that they're wrong, you know. And I would like to suggest that these people are just as restless at heart. And they're just as far from home. Homeless children of this kind often find it hard to accept that they're actually as needy as the ones who run away. Or that God receives them just as they are, without all of the trying really hard, getting it right. But homelessness is homelessness, is homelessness, is homelessness. I think you always know if you're far away from home. So just before I end, a little aside. If you have had this kind of judgy experience inside of a church, or if your parents are Christians and actually that was quite a painful experience for you as a kid, or you've actually been made to feel like, I'm not good enough to be here, I'm not clean enough, I'm not whatever enough, can I just say I'm sorry? I'm sorry. We get it wrong. I mean, we've got it really wrong. But can I encourage you that what you've experienced there is absolutely 100% religion, actually religious elitism, and it has nothing to do with the Father in heaven who loves you. God is delighted to call you his son. God is delighted to call you his daughter, and he longs for you to come home. The question really is, if you don't feel at home, would you like to? Would you like to be at home with him? As Ben mentioned right at the beginning, experience has told us that often churches don't really give context to have big questions. Like we're not like open-armed, come with whatever you have. Like, let's talk about, faith and questions and, my angry points of view. But we run a course here called the Life Course, and we ask questions like, does life have a meaning? Is there a God? Can I have a tangible experience of this God if he is so true? Is there a spiritual dimension to life? And when we say there's small discussion groups where it's open and really come with your own questions and your own points of view, we really mean it. We don't mean there's a right answer. And I think this course is a brilliant place for us to do this. What does coming home look like? Is there a God? Is there a home? Like, what is this girl with ginger hair talking about? There's a need for that. So if you would like to come on the course, it's our second week, this Wednesday. Starts at 7, there's food, it's great. Wine is provided, or soft drinks. And the second week is a great week to join. We ask the question, is there a spiritual dimension to life? So it's an open-ended, is there? Then we have a chat about it. So if you're interested in that, why don't you go online to our website? There's loads of stuff. It's called the Life Course.